Welcome to Fresh Takes on Tech, where we explore how innovation is shaping the future of agriculture. In this season, we're diving into the role of artificial intelligence in food and farming and what it really means for growers, ag business leaders, and the entire food system. Today, I'm joined by Ranveer Chandra, VP at Microsoft of the Copilot team and CTO of AgriFood at Microsoft. In this conversation, we'll talk about what Microsoft is doing, what Ranveer is doing, and why this is important to the produce industry. So it's really great to have you on the show and talk to you about this important topic that you have such deep knowledge in.
Great to be here, Vani. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with give us a little bit of your background, how you ended up at Microsoft, how you ended up in ag at Microsoft, which I don't know if there was any ag in Microsoft when you started.
Yeah, no, great question, Vani. I grew up in India. I grew up in a city called Jamshedpur. I did my undergrad there and came to the US for my PhD in computer science. I had no agriculture background. I did spend a lot of time growing up in my grandparents' farm in India, in Bihar, but that was my only exposure to farming. And that wasn't a pleasant one. I didn't enjoy going to my farm, my grandparents' farms every summer and winter vacation because the rest of the year I was in a city, and in the summer and winter vacation I was in this village. The villages there didn't have any electricity, they didn't have toilets, and so it was 4 months a year I was there. But I did make a lot of friends. I learned how to bike there. I played kabaddi. I did get exposure to a lot of primitive forms of agriculture, like hand-based seeding, bullock-driven tractors, and so on. I came to the US with my PhD in computer science, joined Microsoft. I would have become an academic, but Microsoft Research was a great place to be. I joined here. And then I started working on different areas. And then around 2010 is when I started thinking of working in the agriculture space. I went and met several farmers across the US, volunteered on farms. And then in 2014, I wrote a memo saying, what should Microsoft be doing in agriculture? In particular, it was around how a lot of the tools that we build in tech around cloud, around edge compute, around Internet of Things, around artificial intelligence, if we brought all that together to agriculture and food, how it could transform the entire industry. And back then, I was told, well, Microsoft doesn't do agriculture. I had to change my manager. I took a different, I was given a couple interns. I was said, go work with the interns, see what you can do. And that's what got me started. We built this farm of this, like a farm close to Microsoft campus where we worked with a farmer, showed what a farm with all of this technology could look like, showed benefits to one grower. And that was then covered by The Economist in print. And then Bill Gates
I
reads The
love
Economist
that.
because he then sent a few people over to meet us. And then it took off from there. Satya saw it, Satya Nadella. He blogged about it, and Bill Gates covered it in Gates Notes. And then we built a product around it. And that's the journey. That's how it started around in 2014, 2015. But since then, we have been working in this space, and it aligns with Microsoft's mission. If you think of why does Microsoft do this? So Microsoft's mission is to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. If you think of every person, it includes every grower, every person in the food industry, and every organization includes farms and all the retailers, everyone in the food industry as well. So it's very tied into Microsoft's culture and mission.
That's really interesting, and that was really early. I mean, I there wasn't a lot of conversation, about what technology to use on the farm and how to integrate it, and so did you outside of so inside Microsoft, they're saying, "This guy's kinda crazy, and, why are you working on this?" And then outside Microsoft, you've got, not a lot of growers read The Economist, maybe some, but, so how did you start getting traction and really start getting your products and your services out into the field more?
Yeah, so initially when we started, we did face a little bit of pushback from the agriculture community, like the companies, not the growers. The growers were very open to us. They didn't see Microsoft as a threat at all. Everyone I talked to, they started opening up, and we started going and talking and deploying things in their farm. But the companies in this space, initially there was some pushback. But at that point, I remember going to Land Lakes and meeting Teddy Wickele, and
Uh-huh.
that actually worked out quite well. So Teddy and then his team started educating us on a lot of things going on in this space and how all the technology we were building could be applicable. And that led to the start of all of these projects around, initially Project Farm Beats, then Project Farm Vibes, and now Generative AI, and to what I'm doing in Copilot tuning. It originated in when we are doing things for agriculture, and then we are now building it for other industries as well.
So in your kind of go to market strategy, is it who's your main customer? Do you work with people like Land O'Lakes, and is it a service or kind of how do you bring in revenue, I guess is the question.
Yeah, so for us, it's around the products that Microsoft builds around cloud, around artificial intelligence. Now, everything is bundled into what we're doing with artificial intelligence. And Microsoft is not an agriculture company. So we shouldn't expect Microsoft to be selling these products directly to farmers. But we work with a lot of partners who build their products on top of the Microsoft platform. So things like, so companies such as Land O'Lakes, Bayer, many other companies that we're working with are building their products on top of what we're building at Microsoft.
So it's important for you to understand their needs and their uses, and then a lot of those companies I know, like, they're building products on top of what you have, and then they're gonna sell some things with that, and so it's just this cascade of technology stacks that ends up in the farm.
Yeah, exactly. So we build the base layer of the platform with what's going in the cloud, with some of the AI algorithms, but the solutions, we don't understand farmers as well. We use the knowledge from learning from farmers to build the base product, to build the cloud technologies, AI technologies. But the final way, how do you service it to a grower, is what these agriculture companies, the food companies, they understand it much better. So they are the ones who then take it to market.
So let's talk a little bit about AI and how I think when I first met you, no one was talking about AI. AI wasn't a thing. And so we're really in the podcast just trying to explore what on a very practical level companies need to be doing around AI because it's one of those topics where everyone has to have an AI strategy. And so one, talk a little bit about that, the practical uses, and then how it became so important at Microsoft and what your work is around AI.
Yeah, so great question, Bonnie. With artificial intelligence, this is an area that's not new per se. People
Yeah.
started talking about it in the 1950s when the term was coined in the first place. And since then, there have been ups and downs in the development of this technology, essentially around getting computers to behave like humans, to think
Mhm.
like humans. And there have been a lot of technologies over the years, all the way from the basic math to Bayesian learning to machine learning, deep learning. This has gone through phases, and now we are in this new phase where we've seen the capabilities of AI. There have been quite a few breakthroughs around artificial intelligence. We see what's happening now, but the question you could ask is why didn't it happen 20 years before? Is because there are a lot of building blocks that has led to this AI advancement. Things like there is a lot more compute that is available. There is a lot that with cloud, with Azure, with other clouds, there are these big data centers where you could put a lot of compute together. There is a development of GPUs. The same GPUs that were initially used when on your graphics screen are now being used to run a lot of powerful AI workloads. Then there is data. Because of the internet, now you can start bringing all of that data in one place, and the cost of storage has come down. So, with data, with cloud, with compute, and the development of these algorithms, now we are seeing with these large models, that's why they're called LLMs, large language models, you now see these breakthroughs happen in AI where AI is now able to behave a lot more like humans. It's able to write sentences, write poems, it can create reports, it can do a lot of things to accelerate what a human does. And that's why at Microsoft, we took the stance that what we are building are these co-pilots. These are not the pilots, they are a co-pilot. They're an assistant. They can be a very powerful assistant in everything that we do. And right now, when we started working on AI, basically all the work in agriculture, the first thing we did was started looking at how do you bring the data from farms, from the agriculture and food supply chain in one place. That
Uh-huh.
itself was the challenge. You remember those days, Bonnie, you're
Yeah,
talking about 5G, and before 5G came out, we started looking
right.
at different technologies and edge compute. That was the first thing we did. But data by itself is only so good. You need to take that data and translate it to insights. And that was the second phase of what we had to develop at Microsoft. We started looking at okay, we have a lot of data. Can we use these data to train the models and use these models to predict what's going to happen? For example, like for example, you want to predict what is the expected yield in a farm. Well, you could take the image of the farm over several years from satellite data or drone data, and you have the ground truth data. That is, you know what the actual yield per plot in the farm was through, say, the tractor harvest data or so on. You have that information. If you know what was the yield, if you know what was the satellite image, can you then use it to train a model and start predicting what the expected is? These are just some examples of what you could potentially do. We wanted to start building these models, but we quickly realized this is a super hard problem to solve, especially in agriculture. We were doing this for other industries where it's easier. In agriculture, the particular reason it is hard is for two reasons. One, the data is sparse, you don't have a lot of data, and the data is noisy. A lot
Yeah.
of times the data you get is not clean. So then the key techniques we started developing was this concept of multimodal AI. We'll take data. What essentially this means is, rather than just using one data stream and trying to predict, like for example, only looking at satellite imagery is not good enough. What if we combine satellite imagery with, say, sensor data or tractor data or weather station data? So we built a lot of capabilities around this called farmvibes.ai, and we've released this in GitHub. People should go to GitHub and check this out and contribute. We made it completely open source for anyone in the community to go build. And we are seeing lots of usage. We've used this to build a farm of the future in India. It's one of the higher rated open source repos for agriculture. But then while we were doing all of this work of multimodal AI and combining this and translating data to insights, we realized that, the part that is missing is, how do you, I could plot really good graphs and so on. But how do you convey it to a grower? A lot of time a grower is in the middle of a farm, their hands are soiled. Many of them are workers who are not well educated. They might have a dumb phone. So then the question was, okay, how do you convey all of this information to the farmer? So we realized we need another breakthrough in AI, and that's when everything with generative AI happened. This post Chat GPT moment. People say BC and BC is before Chat GPT and after Chat GPT. So that's when the Chat GPT moment happened. That's when we realized, hey, we need to take all of these innovations and bring that to agriculture and food. And that has been the next big work that is happening at Microsoft, is on how do you bring generative AI to different industries, including agriculture and food.
So how do we do that? And especially as you talk about with like some of the smallholder farms that have less technology, what kind of stories have you seen? What kind of examples have you seen? Is this working?
Yeah, and this is a question that we hear very often from many stakeholders in the agriculture, food supply chain, is how should they be ready for generative AI? What is the impact of generative AI on their business? One of the key things that I would like people to say is, first they should just embrace AI as an individual, as an organization. It's a very powerful assistant. They should never AI. When people talk about AI shouldn't be seen as the solution, but AI should be seen as a very powerful enabler in whatever people do. Any business process that people talk about, we are able to then come up with another version of that business process that is transformed with AI, which is more efficient, efficient in multiple ways. It's more cost effective. It's much faster. Things that people would take much longer to do would be much faster. Anytime there is paperwork involved, like in the food supply chain, many of the people who might be listening to this podcast, they have a lot of paperwork. Do they really need to have humans generate that paperwork? A lot of that could be really automated, could be really removing a lot of inefficiencies in the way we operate. So then coming back to the question of, okay, what should people do? I think number one, they should just get brushed up on generative AI and start using it and start rethinking all the business processes that exist. So we've done this, for example, for agriculture. One of the first things we did when we started this effort, when ChatGPT came out, and even before that with GPT-3, we started looking at all the different stakeholders in the agriculture and food supply chain. This includes bankers, policymakers, farmers, data scientists, agronomists. And we started looking at what is that Gen AI transformation? What is that business transformation for this particular persona in the agriculture and food supply chain? We have a complete internal report, and we could happy to share it with people. But the next thing we did was, okay, now that you have this transformation, let's start going and realizing one of them. So one of the ones we realized, for example, was an AI agronomist. So he said, okay, there is an agronomist. To become an agronomist in the US, you need to pass this certified crop advisor exam, the CCA. So we then said, okay, at that time there was this post going on LinkedIn where people are saying, these Gen AI models don't perform that well on the CCA exam. So we took the exam, and very interestingly, we got very good grades. So we, like, AI took the exam with certain techniques that we modified AI with, and it got 94% grades with GPT-4. And that was really cool. We took the exam in Embrapa in Brazil, and there we got 84% grades. In India, we got 79% grade, which was more than the number one human for that agri exam, which was 78%. So at that point, you can see AI is able to learn a lot. And if you think of an agronomist's workflow, this could be a very powerful assistant to an agronomist. An agronomist goes out in the farm or is answering a question. An agronomist is not available 24/7. Well, even when they go out to the farm, there's so much an agronomist knows. They know a lot, but they don't know everything that's happening in different parts of the world. That's too much to expect from anyone. And
Mhm.
with an AI could be an assistant that could come up with things. It could then prompt the agronomist, and the agronomist essentially has to validate, because they know the final answer. They know what could work and what couldn't. But AI could be a very powerful agronomist assistant. This is just one example. You could see how this could translate to, say, a policymaker, a banker. A banker needs to communicate, send reminders, estimate risk. All of this could be enabled with generative AI. So going back, I would say, every organization in the agriculture and food industry, or should needs to go and educate their workforce on AI, start rethinking what is the future, what is the organization look with AI in the future. And at Microsoft, one of the things we talk about is, for example, this concept of a frontier firm. We just published this Future of Work report where, right now, these agents are called on demand. Like, for example, you'll send a report and say, summarize this report. And the AI will do a reasonably good job and come back with a response. This is this is an agent that you invoke on demand. The next phase is when you're going to have these agents be co-workers with you. They are going to be doing things that, like, for example, project management, writing reports, replying to customers. Some of that work would be done by agents that are working along with you, and that's the second phase. But the frontier firm is when, humans will be managing a group of agents. Everyone, like, now, we tell people you don't need to be a manager, but in the future everyone will need to learn to manage multiple agents to get the work done. And that is the future of every organization. Everyone should start thinking in terms of that transformation. Be it a farmer, they need to think of what it is. To anyone, a food processor, they need to start thinking of all the different work that is done and how AI can help every employee become much more productive. And, to a retailer, every entity needs to go through that transformation.
So many questions on that. One thing, that's a really great description of agentic AI. I was at CES in January and I walked in, in one of those gigantic rooms, and somebody really important, a CEO of some big company, was on stage. And I'd never even heard the word agentic AI. And so since then I've heard it a lot, and I think there's a lot of confusion about, the difference and how it's being used. But I think your description, and especially looking at that, is the stage that we are now. And we are, even in my own use of it, I feel like I'm managing a team, and I haven't gotten to the point of really having agents. I'm still managing one person at a time writing something. But I think that's a really good description of, what the frontier is and how we can move forward and
Yeah,
really use it that way.
yeah. Yeah, and it will happen, and we'll all have to be very responsible, very innovative in making that happen. Bonnie, right? Like, for example, doing it in a way that humans things are acceptable. Like, for example, you could say, hey, you know what, I could train my own AI model so that you don't have to be on this call with me on this podcast. It could be your agent. But that is not a great experience. If you ask me today, I don't think it is the experience that I want as someone being interviewed, nor do I think your listeners would want that. But at the same time, there are many other tasks. For example, cleaning up the podcast, making sure that it sounds great.
Yeah.
That's a job that AI can do really well, and that's a place where you might want to use AI. So just doing it the right way to make sure that people have the right experience, people's preferences are accommodated, and using that to shape AI, I think is going to.
One of the things that I've talked to a number of people about is just thinking about, there's a lot of kind of back office AI in the produce industry and some around transportation. And there's a lot of on farm AI that you've worked really close with and prediction. How do we in an industry that's so fragmented? I mean, we have a few vertical companies, that are vertically integrated across, making breeding decisions all the way to getting it to the shelf at a major retailer. But most companies aren't. Most companies are someplace along in that chain. And so how do we work with AI when if you're trying to do prediction from like breeding to when will it be shipped, when will blueberries be shipped from Peru and be on the shelf in Dallas, Texas in Walmart. So using it through the whole system like that and using predictive and just making that whole system run better. How does that look in the future and how will different entities work together?
Yeah, one great question. And that's a vertical integration here. You have all the data. It's easier to build those models. But most, as you mentioned, most of these enterprises are not vertically integrated. We have different enterprises, someone growing food, someone doing transportation, someone else doing food processing and retail and so on. And that's where with AI, what people are talking about is this agentic AI, where you have different agents hosted even by different organizations in the future. And this could be things like either there are these concepts called tool calling or agentic, like, there are protocols that have people have proposed called Model Context Protocol, MCP, that came out through Anthropic. Google proposed A2A for agentic AI, where, you have different agents. They are still very, very early. But if you ask me what is the future here, I think, at Microsoft, for example, we are using both MCP and A2A and helping customers build those agents and for example, you could have a particular organization's agent and multiple of these agents. You could have a ServiceNow agent, you could have a Cloudflare agent, and through Microsoft Copilot, you can then call these agents and come up with the end-to-end workflow. But the other challenge you mentioned is it's not one company buying different services, but there are different companies by themselves. How do you get them to share this information? There's some ideas that have been floating around. The key part there is around authentication and security, but people will resolve this. This is where you could envision a food processing company being able to call the farming company saying, "Hey, what is coming now? Or what's the prediction?" Using that to then schedule something from the logistics companies. So I think all of these would be different agents that would be talking to each other in an automated way. Right now, it's still manual. What people are trying to figure out is, and the biggest reason is, the security side of things. How do you authenticate who you're allowed to talk to? And there are multiple approaches being proposed. This is a very, very active area of development in artificial intelligence. And if you ask me, 6 months down the line, I think you'll start seeing the first deployments of this with people figuring out what this would
So
look.
do you think it'll be an outside company that will say, I mean, I'm trying to figure out how the whole thing fits together. Is it an outside company like Microsoft or somebody else that goes to, retailer, grower, researcher and says, "We can pull all this stuff together. You have to, like, buy into our service?" Or is it someone like a large retailer saying, "You have to comply to our service that we built," or is it just gonna be kind of a mess for a little while of both types of
Yeah,
things?
so people are exploring both approaches where, there are these aggregators who are saying, we could aggregate things, go through us. The alternative approaches people are talking about is completely decentralized, where, you don't need to trust any one entity. We'll ensure it through techniques like, these and cryptographic techniques that no data is leaked and you can make it completely distributed. You could build both of these kind of approaches using Microsoft tech. But at this point, I think it is still being figured out. It's very early days, and but people will come. I think there is a very, very good, convincing argument to be made why this has to happen. Where for example, for placing the orders, do you really need someone calling up someone else to say, "Hey, I need this," and then the other person responding? It could just be an agent that is set up there, where your agent just communicates with the other company's agents, places the orders and when things fail is when a human comes in and says, "Hey, this is what needs to be done." This will remove so much inefficiencies in the entire supply chain. It'll make people more productive. You can place the order at just the right time at the right price, so that you don't have to be bottlenecked by the person coming to work to take that order.
Yeah, it's a huge issue when someone has an order. like a farm has an order and they can't fill it, and there's, cooperation between local farms of like, well, let me buy some from you and then I can fill my order, and then, so there's this like floating marketplace that happens mostly with phone calls and spreadsheets, and it's super inefficient. That's a lot of time and inefficiencies and things that don't work. So that, that would make complete sense. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
Ronnie, there's so much guesswork that happens in our entire supply chain,
yeah.
all the way from the farm to every entity. There's so much guesswork that happens. And I think a lot of it, we'll start overcoming that by making data driven decisions, AI driven decisions. Yeah.
And with a perishable product, I mean, there's so many points of failure with produce, it can fail in the field, it can fail being harvested, it can fail in transportation, it can fail at the retailers. And so just being able to increase the efficiency and understanding where those points of failure are,
Yeah,
it should help a lot around food waste, and many other things. It should have a huge impact.
definitely.
Well, as we finish up, what are some things that we aren't thinking about that you think about? That the future of where this is gonna go and kind of the bleeding edge, if you think we might go, and that will really help the industry.
Yeah. As I think of where we are going with AI, the capabilities of these models are going to become even more powerful. Each model is going to become even more powerful in the kinds of things it's able to do. The other part, which I'm actually is a product I'm leading at Microsoft, is on customizing these models per customer. Think of it that for your company, for your organization, having a model that's custom for your organization. Because these large models, they've seen all the data on the internet, but they're not trained on customer data, on customer business processes. What if we could help every enterprise train their own models? In fact, we started doing this for agriculture. So this is something which when we were working in that space, we realized that we were when we were giving a lot of the feedback, they were not taking into account the constraints that a farmer has. Like for example, different farmers have different constraints under which they take decisions, what they plant and so on. It's based on different things, what they want the farm to be next year, what all they had done last year. Someone might have a debt or things like that that they need to take into account when taking decisions. So what if you could tune these models for every organization, for every industry? So we started doing that. We published the first paper you'll find on fine tuning GPT-4 was written by us in our group on fine tuning it for agriculture. So we took all the data from USDA over the last 20 plus years and used that to train the model. And then the model showed improved performance for agriculture related tasks. So that's the kind of thing which right now, when you ask of what's the future of AI, I think this AI will get personalized. It is going to be for every person, taking into account your organization's data, your organization's business processes, your organization's needs, and do so in a privacy preserving way. You don't need to compromise on the data. You don't need to give the data to anyone. And that's a technology that my team's actively working on right now. We announced a product and we're continuing to build it. The other capability that will come with AI is everything to do with robotics and the real world. Right now, a lot of AI is still words, images, to so on, but it's not about how you interact with the world. Like, totally, if I move my hand, what should I do next with my hand? If you think of a robot, it's still about humans communicating with the computer and it's trying to complete things. And that's going to happen. There is a lot of investment happening around the role of robotics and where things are going to go around with drones, with all of that. And I think that will take off as well in the next few years. So we see artificial intelligence become this very powerful assistant, which is always around us doing things. But as we are doing that, that's one of the things we just discussed is the message I want to leave everyone is with three things. One is, you know, everyone should be on top of the latest in AI. People shouldn't feel like, hey, I've learned generative AI, so I don't need to learn what's coming next because this field of AI is changing at a very, very fast pace. So people just have to keep reskilling, right? This is important not just to be more productive. This is important for the security of people as well, because people are on the internet. Who knows what else is happening on the internet? They need to be aware of the capabilities of AI. So this is some things. And the last thing I wanted to say is that we need to be responsible. We need to make sure that the world is moving along with us in AI. That is, it's as you know very well, Vani, there's still over 2 billion people not connected to the internet. This is something which we take for granted. If you're not connected to the internet, they are likely not benefiting from AI. So how do you bring the benefits of AI to every person, every organization on this planet is something that is a joint responsibility of everyone working in this space and everyone using these technologies. Otherwise, just like there was a digital divide, there'll be an AI divide. There will be the haves and the have nots. And it is upon us to make sure that the technology gets democratized. And in particular for agriculture and food, where this was one of the industries that fell behind the digital adoption curve. Won't do the right thing, it will fall further behind in the AI adoption curve. So this is where every enterprise, every stakeholder needs to start thinking of how they use it, how they can enable the entire industry to benefit from it.
Is there, in particular to agriculture and the use of AI, is there any sinister downside that you worry about? I think there's definitely this kind of digital AI divide that could happen, which is a downside, which gives, such a competitive advantage to people who are using it and a disadvantage to people who can't through structural reasons. But are there other more sinister things that you worry about in just the ethics of this?
There are interesting challenges that need to be addressed for AI to be used well for agriculture. In particular, there are things around, a lot of the data around agriculture might be around large farms. They might be about the male workers in the farm. So, and AI is trained on all of this. How do you make sure someone should go and do a good bias analysis of what is that, how much bias exists? And how do we get rid of the bias to make sure that it's giving responses equally to everyone, right? That's one of them. The other aspect is around, AI doesn't know agriculture by default. How will you train it to use the right practices, right, practices that are good for plants, good for humans, good for the earth? There are different optimization metrics. And
Right.
how do you get the AI to start thinking like that is another aspect that we need to start incorporating in the AI. Because the AI that we have right now that's trained for on all the data on the internet, it's trained for humans. Once you start thinking about it for an industry, you need to start training it to take decisions so that all of that is taken into account. Without which, we might have an AI that's trained for, yeah, you'll grow huge amount of food, but mess up the planet. Uh,
Exactly.
what do we
I
want
hadn't thought about that of, like, it's really I'm sure it's trained because of the type of data that's on the internet is for yield. It's all about yield. Like, how can we get more, 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 more? And there's not an overlay because there's less data about environmental consequence. So that's a really good point.
yeah, environmental human consequence as well. How do we reduce
Yeah,
fuel use? So yeah,
great.
yes, Bonnie. I think yeah, we all are in it together. We all have to figure out how to do it right and how to do it well because this is such a powerful enabler. If you do it right, it would be a huge benefit to humanity.
Well, I applaud what you've done in your years at Microsoft and getting them to even start down this journey, and then Microsoft as a partner in many things that we do in agriculture that have been proven the ways that we do things, and that will only continue. So thank you very much for your time, and it's great talking to you.
Thank you, Vani. Great talking to you as well.